Orlando Filipino Seventh-day Adventist Church. This is God's church. This is His sanctuary, and these are His people, celebrating God's faithfulness and goodness. Today, July the 1st, 2017, we celebrate our first year anniversary. Let us look back to our humble beginnings and reflect on how God has led us in the past. During the pioneering years, our church had no permanent home. Services held included Pastor Liwag's basement at 105 Lamplighter Road, Altamont Springs.
At first, we were worshiping in the basement of Pastor Liwag's house at 105 Lamplighter Road until we bought a property in Davidson Street, and there was a house standing there. We knocked it down and we started building. The brother and sisters are pledging or make a pledge to start the construction, and with the help of the McNeil Church, we were able to finish the church.
It took them a while to find a suitable place for a church. After so many prayers and supplications, God led them to this property at 1425 Davidson Street, Altamont Springs. And in August 23, 1982, this group of people, God's people, applied His promises to the obstacles that stood in their way. The Filipino American Seventh-day Adventist Church was established shortly right after.
After meeting at Pastor Liwag's house, we found a church at the Lee Road Presbyterian Church, and we rented it for about maybe 2 years. We were organized as a company there, and then we bought the property at Davidson in College Park, where we were organized in July 1983.
It was an exciting day for us to be working together, and that helped us our relationships. We bonded together, and it was really a good time for us to be able to think that we were building the first Filipino church in Florida.
I still remember inviting the La Sierra High School choir. They made a concert during the divine service, one of them. And I still remember Amy George, the famous violinist, and Kelly Mauer, the organist. It was a good concert on all of them.
You know, the church was a 2-bedroom house with 1 bathroom, and we all lined up, all the members, men and women together, and children. We have to fall in line. It was very hard until we renovated it into a big church with a fellowship hall and 2 bathrooms.
We want to give credit to the friends in Avon Park, the many doctors that contributed their means to help set up the church. But I remember one of the highlights for me was an anniversary, maybe 10 years later, and we had invited Mark Finley, and he was gracious enough to come and grace us with his presence, and we had guests all over Florida, and some even from Canada were attending our anniversary then.
The history of the Filipino Seventh-day Adventist Church was not devoid of human weakness or personal struggles. This resulted in a great division within the congregation. In September 11, 1993, 11 years after the Fil-Am Seventh-day Adventist Church was established, the deep chasm gave birth to the Sunshine State SDA Church.
Maybe sometime later we got bigger and we decided that we would have two groups. And so some members started forming a group. And it was kind of a challenge for each of us. We were young and friends, and a lot of us were schoolmates. It finally turned into the Sunshine State Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Actually, it was called the Asian American Seventh Adventist Church. This was our first, I call it song hits. These were selected songbooks from the SDA hymnal. First, we gathered at Matthews Park to organize our group under the leadership of Pastor Zeman, who just came from California, right in front of my house at College Park. And then we found this rental church at Nazarene in Formosa, College Park. From there, we went to Far Avenue, where we were organized among ourselves. We made pledges. It was already a church that was there, and so we just refurbished it and remodeled it. We again with our sweats and offerings.
The history of our church is a living testimony to God's faithfulness to His people. Despite of our lack of faithfulness and our propensity to go on our own, God never fails. Though only 5 miles away from one another, after 16 years, these two churches, the Fil-Am Seventh-day Adventist Church and the Sunshine State Seventh-day Adventist Churches, went on their separate ways. What seemed unthinkable and impossible to our own human capacities become unstoppable with God. No one can stop God's plan. May 5, 2007 marked the beginning of our oneness in Christ. For the first time after 16 years, both churches worship together as one. The new name Orlando Filipino Seventh-day Adventist Church was approved by the Florida Conference on June 16, 2007.
It was in October 2006 when two officers from the Florida Conference office met with Fil-Am Church and Sunshine State Church in the person of Pastor Ken Bureau and Pastor Tim Nichols, laid plans and proposals to merge these small two churches to become one. Both churches thought this plan is not acceptable, is not possible. And myself, I believe that this transition and this plan is not going to happen easily. But to some members, a few of them felt that this has to happen. It created the feeling of joy. It created feelings of excitement and fulfillment. And the two churches began to pray.
The Florida Conference, Elder Obed Graham, initiated the merge between the two churches. He said that there's no reason for two churches who are 5 miles apart not to be one, because and we all spoke English, and so we met first at the conference. I think we
were really devoted to Filipino American SDA Church. Our hearts are there. We are dedicated to stay there. We don't like to join any other church, even though it's just 3 miles away from Sunshine Church. So anyway, finally we were convinced
It was a blessing actually to have Pastor Greg to be with us as the conference had given him to us as a pastor, because he built really our foundation in our faith in the Lord. And that's why when he started uh, uh, preaching in the morning to the Fil-Am Church and then the afternoon and the Sunshine Church, he felt that need also that these two must unite. But somehow in his preaching, he incorporated that plan that he has, that to be able to put us together. And so he uses Bible examples, Bible stories in his preaching to be able to be grounded, for us to be grounded as church members.
God bless the Orlando Filipino Seventh-day Adventist Church. The Sunshine facility where they did Sabbath services could no longer accommodate more than 350 members and visitors every Sabbath. On September 2, 2007, the first building committee was formed. They began looking at the possibility of renting a bigger facility, demolishing the existing structure and building of a new one, or buying an existing church. After several fastings and marathons of prayers, on February 18, 2008, God opened a door and led them to a place in McNeil.
September 2, 2007, the building committee met for the first time. From this meeting, the committee came out with 3 recommendations for the church to consider. Number 1, looking at the possibility of renting a bigger church. Number 2, to demolish the existing Sunshine State Church facility and build a bigger church in the same property. And number 3, to find an existing church facility big enough with a minimum seating capacity of 350. The church was challenged. The church was challenged to bring this plan to the Lord. The church had prayer and fasting, because we know that without His blessing, everything will be in vain.
I remember when we are growing as one church now, we decided to look for a bigger place of worship. And so we started scouting every vacant place of worship, house of worship around our area. So there was one time, a day when we were at the church parking lot with Brother June, I think, doing some measuring of the parking lot and maximizing the space for parking and putting some lines. A lady from Maranatha SDA Church on Bear Lake passed by and looking for somebody, or the one leading our Angklung group, our youth Angklung group. And I think they're trying to invite the Angklung group to their church. While we were talking, we mentioned that we are looking for a bigger place, and that's where she suggested that across there, the street where the Maranatha SDA Church, there's a for sale sign of the church there in the corner of Bear Lake and McNeil. And so that's where how we felt that the Lord was leading us. So I told Brother June, after the work we did that Sunday, I think we stopped by on that place to check the McNeil property.
I was then the head deacon of the church, and one day, I believe it was February 18, 2008, it was Monday, November and I were working on the parking lot to put some kind of markers, and at that night, there was an event going on at the church. I believe it's a Pathfinder event, something like that. And then there was this lady, I could easily remember her name, Veronica from Maranatha Church, who happened to be there because she was trying to get hold of the leaders of the Angkong group. And talking to her, we were asking her if she knew some church that were for rent. And she said, you know what? Across Maranatha, I saw a sign there that is for rent. And a church that is for rent. So that night, I was thinking then of going to Home Depot in Altamont, and for some reasons I changed my plan, and then I went to look for that sign. And I know it was dark, but I was able to find the sign of the church, and was able to talk to the pastor of the church. And then this church is the McNeil Church. And I was able to talk to the pastor. His name is Pastor Ramos. And I asked him, are you really renting this church? And he told me, you know what, we're not renting this anymore. But upon insisting to him, maybe we could rent this. I said, you know what, we're thinking of selling this. And then I asked him that moment, Pastor, would you mind if I call some of our group and right now, and then give us probably only half an hour, and we could talk to you? He said, okay, I can wait. And then from then on, I called Novem and Romela, because I know they live close by, and within 20 minutes, they were there at the church. And then I remember when they arrived, we had prayers under the oak tree next to the driveway along McNeil to pray that He will guide us with our discussion or our deal with for this church. Because right there, we're planning of making an offer for this church.
The Florida Conference Property Development signed the contract on March 6, 2008, to buy the property at McNeil for $1 million. On December 14, 2008, the Fil-Am property was sold for $400,000, which means the money was short by $600,000. With no bank willing to lend the much-needed funds, again the congregation turned to God and on their knees prayed. After all, this is His church, and these are His people, and He has promised, I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. God replied through Bank First. February 5, 2009, we officially closed on the property and were able to burn the mortgage in just 5 years. Praise belongs to God alone. This is a reaffirmation of God's faithfulness. In January of 2010, Orlando Filipino Seventh-day Adventist Church was blessed to have a new church pastor who came all the way from Canada. Under God's guidance, our church in McNeil continued to grow and flourish. Overflow rooms were utilized and parking became a weekly problem, a deterrent for some people to join the Sabbath worships. And through Pastor Katagai's Leadership Vision 2020, adventures of faith began. The next 4 years were spent looking at several properties, assessing several options, and earnest prayers were sent up to God. But every contract that we were ready to sign somehow fell through. The idea of moving out of McNeil seemed to be an impossible dream. Truly, God is faithful. On July 24, 2015, ownership of the Forest City Spanish Church was officially transferred to the Orlando Filipino Seventh-day Adventist congregation. On July 1, 2016, the church had a formal ribbon-cutting ceremony to celebrate God's miracle.
We pleaded with the Lord. We asked for His guidance. And the thought that came to us as leaders of the church was, this has nothing to do with our capability, with our financial readiness. It's about our faith in the Lord. Remember, our Vision 2020 is entitled Adventure of Faith. So this is where our faith will be tested. So with the approval of the church board and the business meeting, we proceeded with the plan of acquiring this property, but with a firm commitment that if this will be the will of the Lord, He will make things happen. And so, looking back to how the Lord led us, it was purely through God's miracle that He led us to this place. He enabled us to find resources to pay for our financial obligations. And so we're confident that it's not because we have the money to pay for all our dreams and our plans in the future. We always go back to the memory that it was all about God's goodness, generosity, in giving us what we need if we will just be faithful in our commitment, in our relationship with Him.
We see God's guiding hands in the history of the Orlando, Filipino Seventh-day Adventist Church. Through His grace, we will always be a congregation of people who finds delight in worship to Him. He never fails. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
This church will be a family of God where they can have a life-changing encounter with Jesus. And so, not only for our members, but for those around us, we hope that we can be channels of blessings so that everyone can glorify the Lord and we can prepare more people for His soon return. To God be the glory.